Well, welcome into another episode of Story World. Steve Schramm here, your boy Al. What's up, man?
Having fun. Just got done watching an episode of Rings of Power
That's awesome.
with my guy Steve and Andy, and so that was a fun time.
Yeah, it was fun. We still have our a few gripes. Maybe we'll talk about that at some point. But overall, I'm enjoying the show. Um, I'm really upset that you have like a really cool handle. Like when this show is super big, like you're gonna be known as your boy Al, like from the very beginning, and I'm gonna be just Steve.
And there's nothing wrong with just Steve. It might not be as cool as your boy Al, but I'm
Maybe I
also
should make maybe I just invented my handle. Maybe it should actually be just Steve,
just
you
Steve,
know? Yeah,
and I'm your boy Al.
just Steve. Can I change my name? Can I do that, like, right now? I don't know if it'll let me. I don't think
Well,
so.
it's a little bit too late though. Now you should have started at the beginning.
Well, I guess. Yeah. Oh, darn. Okay, well, on this week's obviously exciting episode of the Story World podcast, we're talking about self-talk, telling yourself stories, lying to yourself. This is Story World, and I have found, to just kind of get right into it, that oftentimes the most powerful stories are the ones that you tell yourself, what you believe about yourself internally, what you've told yourself throughout the day. Um, and maybe a lot of this is even happening subconsciously. Now, look, don't turn me off if you're not into the woo woo stuff. Like, don't turn me off. This episode might break some of your categories or might be a little different than you're used to thinking, but I would advise you, or I would ask you to please listen to the end. We're gonna talk fish and practical things, but also, um, I really do think it's true that when you talk to yourself, sometimes you're your own worst critic. You're sometimes mean to yourself. You're sometimes not fair to yourself, and or sometimes it might be the opposite. Maybe sometimes you puff yourself up in pride, and the reality of it is that nobody else sees you the way that you see yourself. I mean, can I get a witness on some American Idol auditions, right? I mean, like when so sometimes you can tell yourself things that are not true, and maybe even sometimes the people around you reinforce those beliefs or ideas. And so we're going to kind of explore that and deal with that. And I'm not even sure how much of what we talk about this episode is going to be like directly applicable to the normal things we talk about, fiction writing, marketing, and business. We're going to get into maybe a little bit of business stuff on my end. Um, but yeah, it's going to be a little different topic. Alex, your introductory thoughts?
Yeah, my kind of thought this was Steve's topic that he kind of pitched to me,
Yeah, so if you hate it, it's
and
my fault. That's what
yeah,
Alex
I'm just getting
introductory
that
thought.
right. Yeah, I just want to push that out there. But what I kind of think of off the back with like self-talk, telling yourself stories, kind of getting in your own head. A lot of that initially, what you might think of is like self-help. It might kind of seem a little bit like that, but I think if I'm kind of correct in what Steve's kind of thinking about is it goes a little bit further than that. It's a little bit more of a digging down deeper in just how you help yourself, how you maybe drag down yourself, and yeah, just how you kind of methodically think through things about your life, where you want to go, what kind of story you want to tell, and amongst other topics.
Yeah, I agree. Do you so we'll just welcome to my couch, Alex. We'll just start with a little therapy
Your
here.
couch is comfy.
So so how yeah, so good. So how do you talk to yourself? Do you like as you're thinking about it, because now I've made you think about it because we're recording a podcast episode. Um,
Yes.
do you like how does this work for you? I mean, do you talk to yourself? Or do you find that maybe you believe things about yourself that, like, if you were to think about it for a minute, maybe it's not true? Or like, do you experience any of this, or are you perfect and like don't experience any of it?
I'm perfect. Right,
Oh,
let's just get that right off the bat.
oh, okay, cool.
It's just
Yeah.
yeah.
Sweet.
um,
Just so we're clear.
yeah, it's first of all, another little rabbit trail before I answer your question. Just a kind of fun fact thing is eh, talking about just like self-talking, talking to yourself. I think, mentally, just kind of talking with yourself in your mind. But there's some people that don't have an inner voice, they can't like mentally talk to themselves. Isn't that
I've
crazy?
heard this.
If
I've
someone,
heard
if you
this.
people have never, if anyone listening has never heard that before, like look it up. There's people, I don't know, it's pretty rare, I guess, but there
Mhm.
definitely are people out there. You look at interviews where
Yeah.
they literally like they think in like abstract stuff, whether it's like shapes or concepts, in order to actually like form words to talk to those, they have to talk out loud. It's a crazy thing. But
Yeah, I don't know what
I
life would
just
be
I
like
can't
if I
picture
had
that.
to do that.
And all
Yeah.
those people, like, they find out later in life, like, wait, like, you can actually, like, you actually talk to yourself, like, in your mind, and it's like, they're blown
Yeah,
away.
yeah,
Anyway, little
yeah,
rabbit trail, but
yeah.
anyway, um, so
Hey, but well, while we're on a rabbit
yeah.
trail, before you answer my question, why for the benefit of our viewing audience, now our listening audience cannot experience this, but
Uh,
for the benefit of our viewing audience, but would you like to show off your new Lord of the Rings, your new
yes,
ring? Isn't that awesome? That the
yes,
Alex has the
I'm
One
really
Ring,
thinking of
the
it.
One Ring. Now it's rubber, right? It's rubber,
Oh,
or
no,
silicon,
oh,
whatever it
no,
is.
this was Forged in the Fire of Mount Doom.
Oh, that was
Right.
Forged in Fire Mountain Doom, the
Yes,
One Ring. Very good,
but
very
yeah, no,
good.
it's silicone. I forget the name of the company. Is it Enso
It's
or something?
Enso.
Yeah, and,
Yeah,
so my wife
yeah,
got it for me,
very cool.
and it didn't come cheap, but it also wasn't super expensive and good quality, and, I'm enjoying it, and, I'm
Mhm.
looking forward to seeing what type of powers I can overcome,
Yeah, well,
well, well,
I was just getting ready to say, turns out Alex is quitting his job tomorrow. He's going to be relocating to his mansion in Mount Doom,
mhm.
where he will be taking over the reins there and controlling all of the forces of evil and darkness with the One Ring.
Evil and Darkness might be stretching a little bit, it's, it's
Your angel of light, Alex.
2
Your
half,
angel
1
of light.
done, tied to the other, it's, it's
Yeah,
whatever you
there you
need.
go.
Alright,
You know,
Steve, let's
speaking
go
of
back.
self-talk,
Go ahead and, ask that question again just so I can.
well, do you ever talk to yourself? Yeah. Do you ever find yourself like maybe believing things that if you think about it for a minute are not true, whether positive or negative? Like, what's your self-talk? What's your inner life like?
Yeah, I really try my absolute best. My self-talk sessions actually happen, like, daily, and they happen pretty seriously. I think it's kind of a twofold thing. One, I'm much like probably a lot of other people too, I'm like my own worst critic. Like I really get in my head a lot, beat myself up, probably more so than I need to. But more recently, I would say like since starting like the beginning of this year, from both a kind of um, Christian perspective as well as just like a personal perspective as well. I really like each day try to focus on and talk to myself about like are you like are you making decisions the way that like you should be, or are you
Mm.
like acting out the life that you want for yourself, and just really trying to understand yourself too, because I mean there's a lot going up in the old noggin, stuff that like we just don't know about, and like stuff that we do without even thinking about it. And so I try to take a deep dive into that every day and just try to understand the person who I am. And
Yeah.
so once when you understand that, it gets kind of scary because you think of all the times that you've messed up, and and you've kind of not stuck to either who you want to be, if you're a Christian or follow other type of faith or whatever, but the person who God created you to be. And so as far as those kind of fundamental, almost like principle like things, I take a deep dive into that each day. Now on a more maybe less serious note, as far as like my goals in life for like writing and kind of on the quote unquote funner side, more fun side of things, getting out of that. Um yeah, I try to examine, I would say most of my self-talk in those aspects are more or less motivations. I think what I had to do is at first, before the motivational kind of talks to myself, I had to understand if what I wanted to do is possible given my range of talents and skills to begin with. I could motivate myself all day to be in the NBA, a 30-year-old dude who is, 5'10" and, just could never make the NBA. I can motivate myself all day and it's not going to happen. And so same goes for writing and whatever other stuff I kind of want to get done in life.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the that's kind of where um it all kind of crashes together, is if you're somebody who says, hey, like I want to write a book, whether you want to become famous with it or not, or make money off it or not. I want to write a book that, people can enjoy. And you come to the conclusion, you know what? I actually can write a decent book. I know I can. I got the mindset for it. I know
Yeah.
I can. Then y- that's where it's like, okay, then the talk becomes, okay, you can do it. So how are you going to get there? What are you going to tell yourself? What are your day-to-day habits going to be in your mind to get to that point where you actually do what you want to do?
Yeah, no, this is really good. I'm kind of glad you started there because you made a point that listening to me probably people might not get to so readily because I always talk so philosophically, not because I'm smarter, actually just because I have to think that way. Um, you made it really practical from the get go, and that's great because I really wanted to land there in the
Mhm.
sense of like it really ends up working out very practically in your daily life. Like I wrote down a few things just as notes while you were talking, so I didn't forget. One of the things to be extremely practical about this, and I used to think again, like I used to think this was super duper woo woo. I'm not doing it now, but there was a period of time where I did it because I had serious self talk issues. This would have
Mhm.
been probably 2017 to 19, or probably 17 to 18. Really, those 2 years, probably maybe even some of 16. I was I was trying to figure out how to do a lot of things. I was working full time. My family was growing. I was having
Exponentially.
exponentially, it seems like, yeah. I was having issues, just identity crisis issues in the sense of like, I had just come out of a what felt like, especially then, a pretty long career where I did nothing but exclusively music. And then basically I had no music other than playing in church. I was working a job. I was trying to build this tech business that ended up becoming a web design business. I was trying to build a ministry on the side. Um, and it was a lot of just trying to figure out who I am. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that's sort of a lifelong pursuit in a sense, but there was a time when I almost wasn't willing to believe that I had what it took, so I did start to use what are called affirmations um, in sort of the, whatever self help psychological world to help with that. And again, like there are some people who just take this to the nth degree where it just becomes extreme. Like, I don't care how many times like Alex just said it, like, you're not going to affirm yourself every morning into a position in the NBA. Like, if you're whatever, like, it's just like, it's not going to happen. Like, you're not going to affirm yourself to grow wings and fly. Like, that's just not going to happen. But if you oftentimes struggle with believing that you have what it takes to, like, accomplish some goal in your life that otherwise would seem reasonable. Like if you actually sit down and logically think about it, you're stationed in a position in life where you could whatever you could create a 3 to 5 year plan to make a thing happen. You're only limited by the fact that you don't believe that you could. Um, then you could absolutely, in a moment of thought and clarity, write down the truth of the matter, and then actually recite that every
Mhm.
morning as part of a morning routine out loud by yourself, and like just hear yourself say those words, right? I can do this, or I am, created in the image of God, and my identity is found in Him, or just like, so there's definitely a spiritual dynamic to it. I know some people who start their day with like 50 to 60 of these. I know people who record. There's actually apps for this. People who record their own voice so they don't have to say it necessarily. They use the app, record their own voice, and then like it just plays back through their affirmations, and they do that every morning, right? So again, this episode is not about affirmations, but that's actually just a really practical
Mhm.
way to implement. Now, I'm not doing that now necessarily, and maybe I have the opposite problem now because the way that, like, I guess I've just done that successfully for so long, and some of the other stuff that we're going to talk about. I mean, I I truly believe that I could do something at a very grand scale. Like, again, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about probably in the future. I've talked a little bit about that new business by Demo Tracks that we're launching, and like it in the last couple of weeks, it became like it went from this very somewhat niche thing that we were doing, even though we knew we were solving a need, to like I truly believe that we're going to change the music industry, like big time, like not just little guys. Like I truly believe we're actually going to change the music industry. And you can say, well, you're deluded. Well, you know what? Like a lot of like people said that about a lot of people. And who weren't deluded. And if Elon Musk can be Elon Musk, if Walt Disney could be Walt Disney, if whoever could be whoever, why can't we do that?
Mhm.
Right. Um, so I think at a certain point, maybe you don't need those sort of things because you're probably to a point where you believe in yourself, but you may need something like that to get going. And the last thing I'll say is I have to think about this, like being intentional versus just being on
Yeah.
autopilot. Like,
Yeah.
believe it or not,
That's a huge one.
what you said there about the way that you think about this, and you're I mean, I don't know if you use the exact word intentional, but you basically, that's what you said, that you were very intentional about it. You every day, it was a part of your process. Like, that doesn't just come to most people, right? That's not how most people, I would think, or I kind of know, like it's really not how most people engage. Most people are honestly cruising through life on autopilot, not stepping outside of themselves, having like an out of body experience to look objectively at themselves. They're just so caught up in the turmoil from day to day, and never take that step. Makes a huge difference in practically how you live your life.
Yeah. There's a lot that you said that I probably should have been jotting this stuff down that just came to mind. And this episode's a little bit kind of going every which direction, but I think that's okay. So, one
Yeah,
thing.
turn it off if you don't want to listen to it, you jackasses. Like, I don't know what else to say. You know, totally kidding. I love every one of you.
every single one. There might be one or two of you, maybe not,
All
but
one and a half of you.
I'll, yes. So one of the I think a good piece of advice too, and this is advice for me that I have to keep telling myself too, um, is small wins really add up a lot over time. And I guess what I mean by that, I don't even know if this is an official quote or if this is something that I said. But it's kind of what I always keep in the back of my mind because it's so true. Um, we tend to just humans by nature, especially people who are like motivated. I guess people who even aren't super motivated, but we tend to really overestimate what we can do over a period of like a year or 5 year or 10 years. But
Mhm.
we significantly underestimate what we can do over a period of like a day or like a week. And so I guess what I mean by that, or maybe I said that backwards. What I mean by that is, um, yeah, it's nice to have long-term goals, if you really have a nice plan, but those long-term goals are not going to be met until you focus on the day to day. So instead of saying, man, like my goal is to write a book by the end of the year. But then if you have a week where you get sick, if you have the flu, and then the next weekend you're on vacation and you're up late, visiting with family, and all of a sudden there goes 2 weeks and you think, wow, okay, I'm not gonna be able to get my book done in a year. I guess I'm just gonna have to reset and, figure out like a new starting place. And that just doesn't work, and it's not very healthy to have that kind of mindset. What really, really works, I would say for at least most people is, like write a page a day. Um,
Yeah.
and don't think about the end of the book will come. If you write a page a day, you'll eventually get to the end. You're not going to write 100,000 pages and say, when's this thing going to end? You will get to the end.
Yeah.
And if there one thing that would always frustrate me, um, and I finally have kind of overcome it is I would have a day where, if it's just a busy day or if I'm sick or there's something else and I don't get to what I wanted to get done for that day, I would like just like beat myself up over it for no reason at all. Um,
Yep.
Instead of just saying, okay, today's done, I'll write that next page tomorrow. Like it's done. And so having so win those battles, um, and I did say that quote wrong. We tend to overestimate what we can accomplish within like a week or a year and underestimate what we can
Yeah. So
accomplish in like 5 years. So I
I'll
said
just
that
jump in right
backwards.
there. So it's a pretty common, it's a Tony Robbins quote.
Is it
I'm not
okay?
sure if he got it from Jim Rohn or not, but the way he puts it, I looked it up just to be sure. I mean, I knew it was a
Yeah.
Robbins quote, but I looked up this precise quote. It's most people overestimate what they can do in a year, and they
Yes.
underestimate what they can do in 2 or 3 decades.
Yep. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, and you can kind of expand that over whatever timeline, whether you're looking at a day to a year or a
Yeah.
year to 10 years or over your whole lifetime. But so it's winning those small battles that really add up. Anyway,
Yep.
so that's just kind of where I went to for there. And I did have another point, but go ahead if you have other thoughts. I'm sure it'll come back to me.
Yeah, all good. This is good. So I think I just kind of wanted to set up a little more about, what I'm thinking of when we talk about self-talk, again, telling yourself stories, maybe even lying to yourself. That could be a harsh way to put it, but
Hmm.
I think for a lot of us it's
Well,
it's kind of true.
and maybe you're going down this road, but what is lying to yourself?
Mm. Um, well, I think it can happen a couple ways. I guess maybe I'll just use an example actually from a book I read that we're going to talk about for my story of the week. Even though this is unrelated to the topic, it's like, have you like most people listening would probably identify with the idea of like you have a fat man living inside of you and also a skinny man living inside of you, something like that. Each go through their moments of sort of driving the boat more than others. Um, for example, you'll go through periods of time where you're highly motivated as thinking as the skinny man, to do your skinny man things. But then you're always asking demands, you're making demands of the fat man who wants to take over at some points too. And the fat man often tells you things like, well, one little bite's not going to hurt or whatever, whatever. But then when the skinny man takes over, he looks in the mirror and says, oh, like I didn't look like that 10 years ago. I'm disgusting. Um, and so my only point there is to make the point that you can lie to yourself by behaving as a kind of person that you are genuinely not. Like, I mean, and maybe a harsh example, but nevertheless true, is something like anorexia, where legitimately by any stretch of anybody's measuring stick, a person can be skinny, but they lie to themselves. It's a psychological disorder, but they're still lying to themselves, where they tell themselves they're fat. And so actions manifest in the real world based on those internal beliefs. And again, that's a very serious and, in fact, medically diagnosable example. But it doesn't always have to be that crazy. What I suggest is that you can lie to yourself every day, multiple times a day, in areas that maybe manifest themselves outwardly in far less significant ways, but that over time you can beat yourself up. I'll give you just one more example of this. I read somewhere one time something that I regret having ever read. Um, I don't know where I read it. That's the thing. That's what makes me mad. I don't know how credible the source was. I don't know where I read it. I don't know when specifically I read it. I have an idea of that. But um, for whatever reason, I read it. And like in that moment, because of what I was feeling, I resonated with it. And now, like, this thought pops up all the time, and I hate it. I want it to go away, but I have to force myself not to believe it. And I'm almost hesitant to tell you what it is because I don't want anybody else to be trapped by the same thinking because I know it's false. But what it said, what the quote was, and you should definitely take this with a grain of salt. It is that a person can only really focus on up to three, like, goals. We'll just use the word goals. That's not the exact thing, but basically goals. A person can really only focus on up to three main goals or objectives at a time. I heard that quote. And so, for example, if I'm focusing on weight loss, growing my business, and going on more regular dates with my wife, that takes up those three slots. And by this logic, in order to improve upon the relationship with my kids, one of those other things in my mental space has to go. So I have to start thinking less about my health and more about my kids in order to make that transaction work. And I think when I read that again, I agreed with it, and it took me quite some time to realize that, like, well, what about people who are legitimately running, like Tony Robbins, the guy who we just said that quote, he's got like uh, 80 companies now that he is in some way involved in at this point in his life, like 80 different companies. If a person can, I mean, and yeah, there's people who like run them and stuff, but like if a person can deal with the mental space. I run one company. I mean, I guess technically two, but mostly one. And if anybody can manage mental space of 80, then I know it's possible to think of more than 3 goals to manage in your life at one time. Um, so anyway, oftentimes when I'm trying to work on myself in different areas, that thought pops up again, and it's I consider it lying to myself, and I don't want it to happen, but it just whatever that subconscious thing that stuck at that moment was keeps resurfacing, and so I have to keep reminding myself, no, like I actually can have a great relationship with my wife, a great relationship with my kids, grow the businesses that I want, be healthy, do hobbies like Story World podcast. I actually can focus on doing all of those things and well at the same time, as long as I organize my life in such a way that that's possible. I'm not limited by some arbitrary number that I read in a blog post.
Mm.
So there's some thoughts. I know that was a long explanation, but that's what I'm getting at.
That's where the self-talking with purpose really is extremely important, especially mostly kind of geared towards people listening who have some sort of like really strong goals in life or want to make like really good commitments in whatever area. It could be a side project, it could be with family, it could be with your career. Is self-talks are important, or else you kind of fall into that category of maybe taking on too much, which can happen. So if you're kind of
Yeah.
aimlessly say, okay, like I want to, I want to start a like a I don't know, I want to start a like woodworking business, and then I also want to kind of get into the gym and play basketball again and just, play some really good pickup ball, and then I want to do this and this. So this minute I hit the gym and then I'm going to do this and that, where and then you're not realistically thinking like what is my physical and mental bandwidth that can actually realistically maintain all that. And so and that can actually take a while to really kind of sit down with yourself and have a self-talk and really
Mhm.
go over, hey, like, okay, here are your priorities in life. What like I have so many interests, and that's the thing that's always been kind of my struggle is I like too many things. I think you're probably the same way too. Like I love space. I love I love
I
numbers.
would turn
I love
everything into a business if I could. I really that's my problem. Like I'm the same way.
yeah.
I'm just like you. I have many interests, but I would turn all of them into businesses, right?
Yeah, gotcha. And so and so, like, for me, the one thing that I had to do was, like, unfortunately, like, drop a lot of stuff off. Like, even though, like, I love space, it really has nothing to do with what I want to do with my writing or my career or anything else, like my core, like, main goals in life. And so I've cut back significantly on just like listening to random like space podcasts or documentaries just because
Yeah.
there's just more allocating your resources. So I guess I forget the specifically what I wanted to hit at here, but just that's part of the self-talk process where if you're kind of in that commitment stage and you're or trying to maybe reset and try to align your goals, um, really be realistic on what you can take on. For about a year now, I've kind of had the same like 6 or 7 things in my life where it's like, these are my core things, and every day I review them and say, like, am I tackling them the way that I'm supposed to be? Am I doing the best that I can with them? If not, why? Is it because I'm just, being lazy? Or is it because there's too much going on in my life? And there have been times at my previous job before the one I'm at now, um, I I didn't have the time. It wasn't really anything to myself. It's just life was other stuff in life was getting in the way of preventing me from doing other things. Now, though, I have a really good schedule where I'm the preventer. So I've had to be really hard on myself the last 2 or 3 months, and
I get that.
it sucks when I've been pretty good. For some reason, this last week, I found myself getting sucked down a rabbit hole where, and sometimes I listen to good podcasts when I'm like, mowing the lawn, whenever, but I got sucked down a weird podcast where I was like getting into like looking at poker stuff again. And like, and then fortunately, like that only lasted a little bit. I was like, okay, I gotta stop that. Like, no, like
Yeah.
that has nothing to do with what you want to accomplish in life. So every once in a while I'll get sucked down those holes, but it's been a lot better. But anyway, I guess that's yeah, just a long kind of tangent of saying, it's those self-talking to yourself is really important to recognize why you might not be hitting goals and what goals you can realistically set for yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that because again, I mean, you could be lying to yourself to just come up with
Mm,
Um, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do that. It's like at a certain point that's exhausting, right? So there is that balance actually between what I said and what you said, where it's like you don't have to be limited by some arbitrary number, but you are going to be limited by human nature, and specifically the way you're wired. I'm a big fan just in general. I know we're all over the place tonight, but
that's fine. It's
this is
fun.
a really
This is a really
important,
fun one.
it's a really important
Yeah.
topic too. Yeah, it is fun. It's also really important. Like, I'm also a big fan of not trying to necessarily make up for where you're weak. Like, sometimes you do need to do that. Um, but like a lot of times you don't. A lot of times you're able to fill in the gaps in your weaknesses with others around you and actually do like the human thing of like teamwork
Mhm.
and being in community and working with each other. Um, and that actually is, I think, a better way to accomplish goals. It's kind of like, um, and this could be a whole nother tangent, but I'm not going to allow it to become one. But
Maybe.
it's so interesting. How many times have you heard the advice? Like, I remember my grandma gave me this advice when I was like, 6. I'm like, "Grandma, I'm 6." Anyway, she's like, but you hear this advice of never get into a partnership. How many times have I heard Dave Ramsey say,
Mhm.
"The only ship that don't sail is a partnership." Um, and yet, the like, you will be hard pressed. They are out there, but they're much rarer. You'd be hard pressed to just pick a successful business out of a lineup of businesses and it not be a partnership. And so what that suggests is that some partnerships don't work for some reason and other partnerships do work, but that's just life, right? Um, so like you again, I think that most things in life can be done with others, and if you instead play to your strengths, which is the point I was getting to, if you instead try to maximize on your strengths and use those things to your advantage and then fill in the gaps with other people where you're weak, then I think that's just an overall better way to do life. And you're not lying to yourself. You're saying, no, you know what? Like, this is how I'm wired. These are my strengths. This is what I'm good at. I don't, in this case, and maybe you think about it, but it's like, I don't necessarily think I need to change. And that's it. And it's like right now, me and a colleague of mine who we're in the same, we work together a lot, but we also have our own companies like doing the same thing. So we talk a lot of business philosophy shop. Um, and we're kind of at like a very similar point. He's ahead of me in terms of revenue, but in terms of like we're both kind of at the point of having to decide like which way we're going to go in terms of like, are we going to become more like the businessman or more towards the technician side of things? And he's leaning one way on that question and I'm leaning the other way, and it's literally the same question. We were talking about this today and he's like, yeah, I've just decided that when it comes to this thing I actually don't want to change. He's like, I've decided that I'm just like, I could change if I tried hard enough or whatever. But he's like, I've just kind of decided that I'm not going to change. And so in his case, he's like, so I'm going to fix the problem with the person. Like, I might bring in a CEO or an account manager or something like that. He's going to fix the problem with another person who is skilled in the thing that he has decided he's not going to change to. Whereas I have decided to go the complete opposite route, or at least to try to, right? I have decided to take a step uh, further back and say, okay, well, I think I'm going to actually try to just get better at the business of business, um, and be less of a technician and be more in the business of my businesses. And he's kind of making the opposite choice, and it's totally okay. It's whatever you want to do and what you're able to do within your limits and your strengths and etc. So yeah, how does this relate to self talk? Well, again, because it's like it's all related to self talk because you have to be self aware of what you are. At the same time, um, if one or the other of us were making the decisions we were because we were telling ourselves that we couldn't do something, that might actually be a problem. It's one thing to know whether or not you're capable of something versus whether or not you want to do something or you should do something. So it all goes into into this bucket of self-talk, telling yourself stories. Your mind is so powerful. I mean, it is the most powerful thing ever. Your tongue. In fact, that's in the Bible, James 3. The tongue, the Bible says, speaks life or death. Think about that. The tongue
Mhm.
speaks life or death. And if you don't believe that, then I'm sorry, I do. But that tongue that speaks life or death, it's the same whether you're talking to somebody else or you're talking to yourself. That inner tongue, if you will. Very, very powerful.
Yeah, touching on the last thing you said about, talking to yourself, and you can really demoralize you or lift you up. Again, this isn't like a self-help, episode of what we're talking about. It's, obviously there's plenty of stuff out there for that, and I don't really care for them too much, although they might help. They must help people because they sell millions of copies every year. But
Yep.
it's,
Yeah.
like, just starting from just a very simple perspective of, not like a 10-point list, but yeah, like, just how do you talk to yourself? Just, honestly, like, approach yourself nicely. Like, even if you beat yourself up a lot, there's times for that. But if you've struggled with maybe getting around stuff in life or understanding like how you operate or why maybe you're failing at things, just, take like an hour, or take whatever time you can and just really think, okay, like, look at your look at your past, maybe some decisions that you've made or what might be stopping you, and just take it from like the simple steps and just have a talk with yourself.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you said this, because so we actually just recently had a wellness weekend at our
Mm,
church, and basically the guy who came to speak, um, and I think it was like 2014. He was a youth director at his church, and they were on a trip. And the short story is the way that he said it was, we lost one of the youth. He
mm,
drowned, never found his body like on his watch, and he said he just couldn't stop being sad about it. And it eventually spiraled into all kinds of stuff, and he ended up getting counseling with a counselor who had actual degrees in psychology and brain stuff, but who also happened to be a pastor of like 30 years. And so it was this great mix. And probably the biggest thing that he said, and he said this just over and over and over again in different contexts, was starting a gratitude journal. And whether or not you put the word gratitude in front of it, I don't really care. But even just starting a journal, because a lot of the time, and there's specifically it was to combat this idea of self talk, because a lot of the time, again, it's subconscious. You don't even realize what you're telling yourself. But when you sit down and you try to journal that out, and by the way, talk about a simple and um, sort of minimalistic investment in yourself. Like, I'm not even asking you to go read a 300-page self-help book, even though I like to do that. Yeah, or even an audiobook or even a YouTube thing. We're literally talking about like go to Dollar General and buy a notebook and make a commitment to sit down for 10 minutes every night and write out, journal your thoughts on paper. Because I think some of you may be surprised to find out once you try to write it on paper what it actually looks like to tell yourself some of the things that you're telling yourself, and literally just write out your thoughts of this is how I'm feeling. These are the things that, like, when I think about it, I'm telling myself, and then ask questions like, is that really true? And I think a lot of the time you'll find out, especially if your self-talk is negative and not in a
mm.
prideful way, which I would say in the vast majority of cases, we have a problem with negative self-talk, not positive self-talk. I think we are self-derogatory. You've heard people say I'm my own worst critic. That's so common. And just journaling out your thoughts, frankly, your feelings to yourself. You don't even have to talk to anybody about it except yourself on a piece of paper. If you're a Christian, maybe talk to God or talk to a friend or a counselor or something. Whatever. But like just even journaling it out can be like one thing that could totally transform your life in this regard and help you to stop telling yourself wrong things.
That's an interesting. So, for doing something physical really helps the mental, a lot.
Oh yeah.
So whether it's something that you struggle with, some sort of addiction, or really like beating up yourself a lot, internally, or maybe laziness, or just anything that kind of gets in your mind and prevents you from doing what you want to do or what you should do. Um, Coming up with some type of physical thing, um, really helps. I've heard of several different things. Like for instance, like stick your head into like a cold bowl of water, or stand up and do like 10 jumping jacks, or like scribble something down. Like
Yeah.
doing something physically, um, just gives you that little success where it triggers something in your mind where it's, hey, like if I can, take a cold shower for 5 minutes, or if I can do 20 push-ups and then 20 sit-ups, and like then I can do more. It just getting yourself to get any physical mentality could really jumpstart the mental side as well.
You're so right about that. In fact, I know people who exercise for their mental health. They don't
Absolutely.
exercise for their physical health at all. I mean, they realize that it's beneficial,
Right.
but they exercise for their mental health. And in fact, I mean, I'm kind of that way too. I'm not in a season of exercising right now, but I found that in my life, and I've tried this as a fat person, as a less fat person, I have I have truly, and maybe it's because I've never stuck with it long enough. I've truly never experienced the benefits physically of a workout regimen. My physical things physically have always changed for me in terms of my health, strictly from food. However, definitely I have experienced the mental benefits
Mm.
of being physical and being active. And so that's why even taking a 10-minute walk, like one guy on YouTube talks about just this concept of a 10-minute walk. And he what he does is he just tries to fit in as many 10-minute walks as he can a day. Maybe it's 2 or 3 minutes, or excuse me, 2 or 3 times, or even one time. It gets some vitamin D in you, it gets you thinking, it does the physical thing. It's just good for your health. So super
Yeah,
solid point.
absolutely.
I think I'd like to make one more point, and this is rare, but this is just sort of the way this conversation has flowed. I'm just basically not going to talk about most of my notes. I think because we've covered things
Yeah,
that
very
needed to be
conversational.
talked about. I
Yep.
mean, I've got lots of things we could go through, um, but since you were on the note of the physical, I'd like to maybe just um, talk about one more exercise that I've heard people do,
Mhm.
and it's very, very helpful. So um you'd probably be surprised to find out what, because like unless you're just somebody who has literally no friends, like literally nobody around you in your life, like nobody talks to you or whatever, you'd probably be surprised to find out how much differently those people think
Mhm.
about you than you think about yourself. Now, I've never done what I'm getting ready to tell you, so I am not advising you from experience. I've just heard other people talk about doing this, and but I have thought about, uh, you know, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I might have done this in the past, but it would have only been with like one or two people. Anyway, so something like this: ask 10 people to tell you either what they love about you, what they think you're really good at, or what like your biggest strength is. So when people like, I really love the second one, like what they think you're really good at, because a lot of times you're so down on yourself on how bad you are at things. It'd be interesting to find out what 10 people around you, what their
Mhm.
perception of is of what you're really good at. Um, like that, to me, that's just fascinating. So it's like, yeah, send that message to 10 people. Hey, look, I'm trying to whatever, like make up whatever excuse you need to. I'm doing a survey. I'm doing a,
Yeah.
somebody else, blame it on somebody else. I've heard them say that before, right? Like my so and so mentor told me to do this, right? So it doesn't sound weird. um, my mentor or an accountability partner I'm working with or whatever asked me to ask you what you think I'm really good at. And just watch those responses come in. And I think you'll be super duper shocked at how differently other people think about you than how you think about yourself. And that can certainly help with your self talk, because then it's more practical. Then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, when I'm thinking this, I can go, wait, well, Alex said this that he thinks about me, and this is like totally different than this is the opposite of what I'm saying about myself. So um maybe Alex is right. So it helps.
Yeah, it does kind of two things. It can either um, you know, confirm or show you what your strengths are, and where you can maybe like focus your skill at, and then the second level is that it can also show that what you thought you might be good at or known for might not be at all. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it helps you deal a little bit more in reality.
Yep, absolutely.
So good. This is good. I think
It was really good.
helpful topic. And let us know if you want to hear more about this. I mean, I know it was a little bit disjointed, but I think ultimately we got some good thoughts out of it. So
It was a little taste too of kind of discussions that you and I had most of the time behind the scenes too, just talking about
yeah, like
anything and everything.
when the end broadcast button gets hit, who knows what's going to come up? And a lot of times it's stuff like this. So
I
you
think
know,
even before Steve and I started to do this podcast, we had a couple movie nights or got together for a couple things beforehand. I forget exactly what, but we would be starting to watch a movie. And I think we spent more time with the movie pause talking about things than we did the actual watching the movie. So it was an hour and a
yeah,
half movie. We probably spanned a 3 hour
yeah.
session.
Yeah, just talking about like one little thing that somebody said or whatever, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, that was part of the catalyst for this podcast is like, there's so many good ideas to discuss when it comes to storytelling. And frankly, just to kind of wrap it up here, I mean, in terms of the topic, I don't think there's anything more important like for your mental health than figuring out what the stories are that you're telling yourself and determining whether or not those are actually true. Some of them may be true, and that's good. But a lot of times, unless you're thinking about it intentionally, you're not actually, you're
Yeah.
just kind of coasting through life and you could be damaging yourself long term or limiting your potential.
And just remember, whatever happened yesterday or a year or 5 years ago, like it's in the past. You really got
Hmm.
to. Obviously, probably there's several areas where Steve and I can go into just talking about like our faith and beliefs and what we actually like believe on subjects like that. But starting fresh today or tomorrow, it does not matter what happened in the past. All that matters is what you do going forward. And so,
Yep, yep. A quote I heard at that wellness weekend it's actually the only one I wrote down. So it was really important to me. It said depression is typically anguish over the past, and anxiety is typically anguish over the future. So if
mhm.
you're just always anxious about the future or living in anguish about the past, then maybe what you need to do is just be more present and see if that
Absolutely.
fixes your problem.
Again, from Christian perspective, only the Lord knows what comes tomorrow. But even if you don't have faith at all or whatever your beliefs are, it's still true. Like the only thing you have control of is what you are literally doing right now in this moment, and
Yep.
that is it. You have control over if you get up in the morning, if you go to work, or if you're working on your own job, or if you're spending time with your family. That is the only thing you have control over is what you are doing with your time. So
Yep. Yep. And that's a
good
big
stuff.
deal.
It is.
Amen.
Awesome, Steve. All right. So, story of the week. You want to kick it off and then I'll close out?
Yeah, sure. That sounds good. So, along these lines, I started reading a book these past couple days that I'm obsessed with, and it's a book that I've been hearing about for a very long time. It's called the E Myth. Specifically, this version is the E Myth Revisited, and even though it's revisited, it is I think the last time it was revised was 2001. Okay, so this has
Oh,
been a
wow.
long time
Okay.
ago. And I've read other books similar, but you know how just sometimes you can hear something multiple times, but just the way you hear it in a particular way, like makes it all make sense to you. And this book is doing that for me. It's a fantastic book. As a matter of fact, I think most people with any inkling of getting into business at all should read this. Um, and I would put it at the top of your list, actually. I would say I regret because I've known about this book for many years. It's hard not to know about this book. It's one of the first ones you start hearing about when you get into the business world, and
Mm.
I regret having not read it now. Um, Basically, it's this: the idea of the E Myth is that a most business owners, and he is specifically talking about the American business owners, American small business owners, but it's probably true across the world as well. Most American small business owners have a technician mindset when they're getting into business, right? So they think about, oh, I am. Let's just use my own example, which is not quite my own example, but it's close. Let's say that I had before I struck out on my own. Let's say I was a web designer for another company. Say I worked for a marketing agency or a web design agency, and I was doing web design. The fallacy is that, oh, if I want freedom and designing my own life and designing my own hours and whatever, um, What I need to do is start my own web design business, working for myself, and that way I can leave the boss behind, I can leave the job behind, and I'll be working for myself. um so that's sort of the e-myth. The e-myth is that a great business is is created by being a person who comes into the business and knows everything about the technical work, and can perform all the technical work themselves. Um, the reality of the situation is that great businesses are built by people who understand how to put together a great business that then can deliver on those goods and services no matter who is doing them. And there are a variety of ways which this sort of manifests itself and works out. But it's it's so common. It's like so common that most people, I think, who even listen to this, if you started a business or whatever, like you're gonna know exactly what I'm talking about. Eventually, you get into this overwhelm. You go through these periods of time where like you're super overwhelmed, so you start to hire people, but then it's like now you have two jobs because now you have to like do most of the work, but also like manage people, and it's just really, really difficult. The counter example to this is doing what Ray Kroc did. He basically asked for the McDonald brothers for the rights to franchise McDonald's, and then eventually he was able to go buy them out, and then he just took the thing worldwide. But Ray Kroc had an office building um, called McDonald, like the McDonald's corporate headquarters, basically. And the idea is at that was McDonald's, but they didn't make burgers or shakes or fries or any of that there. In that office, they made McDonald's.
Mm.
And when you get that, it, it just makes a whole world of difference. That office was for the purpose of making McDonald's, and McDonald's is where the fries are made, the burgers are made, the shakes are made, and all of those things. Another way to put it, so I'll put it in the context of my own business, is it's like I've known this, but not, again, like I didn't grasp it in this way. Like I tell people today when they ask, "Hey, what do you do?" What I tell them is that I'm in the web design and marketing. Like I do web design and marketing.
Yeah.
That's not really true. Really, or at least it shouldn't be. If it is true, it's not good that that's true. Because the truth of the matter is that North Mac Services does website design and marketing. Steve Schramm is in the business of North Mac Services. I'm in the North Mac Services business. North Mac Services is in the marketing and web design business. And that's the difference between a technician and a true entrepreneur. So anyway, you've got technicians, managers, and entrepreneurs. And that's the big unlock, is that the entrepreneur is actually good at designing a business with systems, repeatable processes, and there's all kinds of things that you can go through on this. But anything that makes the franchise model work, like a McDonald's or whatever, that's like, it has nothing to do with how good you can flip burgers or whatever. Like actually the person who is the least skilled person capable of still doing the job should be the one doing it. But the person who matters, not the person, it's not about a person mattering more. It's just about, if you're actually going to be an entrepreneur, if you're actually going to find freedom in owning your business, then you have to work on the business
Yeah.
instead of working in
Yeah.
the business. That's one of the most common things you get from that trickles down through lots of influencers and stuff, but it originates from this book. So anyway, the E-Myth Revisited, great book. I have already started applying and taking it to heart. I am like basically effective immediately. I am making every effort to remove myself from the actual operation because I can see how we're suffering right now. Because I have not been thinking about how to make the actual business successful. I've just been helping to make the day-to-day work that we're doing run smoothly. But the reality is that I'm finding most of the time when I insert myself, things fall through the cracks, or it slows down, or it's like it was a thing that was already figured out. And I inserted myself and it's like, no, we already got this. And so I wasted my time, their time. So I just need to pull myself out of it entirely and focus on designing the business well so that it survives and thrives. And then that's it. Right. And so anyway, that's
Good
it.
rule too for anyone who's like in a management position at your own work or anything like
That's
that.
right.
You know, if you
Mhm.
don't own a business, but you're in someone else's business, it's kind of, trickles down.
You need to understand your role because
Yep.
a manager is different from being a technician.
Mm,
It very like so there right there are very defined roles, um, and you need to know where you fit. You're not if you're the manager, you're not the entrepreneur, nor are you the technician. So you have boundaries and limits in
yep.
which you should swim, a
Yep.
lane, if you will. So
Cool. My story of the week is less serious but very fun, at least in my opinion. It has to do about space too, Steve. So I know that you'll enjoy it. It's weird reading some of these things because I don't, I don't quite know exactly how exact or true they are, but it's always fun to think about anyway. So apparently, a scientist discovered a pair of stars that are in the same system, so a binary system, and they orbit each other in 51 minutes. So in 51 minutes time, they complete a full orbit like around each other. And based on whatever models they do, and this is even less precise, as a certain number of years down the road, it'll increase to maybe like 18 minutes per orbit. And it's just funny, like some of that, like it seems almost like too crazy, and they probably have it wrong. I don't even know how they determine that was set that far away. But at the same time, like in space, really pretty much everything is relative,
yeah.
even time itself. And so it's just some pretty cool stuff. And it just made me think even more about we talked about it before. Um one of my a really great book, The Three Body Problem, and I still have to read the next two books in the series about our this solar system nearest to us, Alpha Centauri. It's got three stars in it. It's just really cool stuff about, I mean, we have our sun, which is pretty normal. Then you can kind of have the binary system and imagine that, but then you have a system with three different stars, and it's just pretty cool stuff. Anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting. They orbit each other in less than an hour.
That's so like it's just crazy, unbelievable. The world we live in, man.
The universe we live in. See,
The
it's the
universe,
story universe.
a story. Podcast brand.
Just a separate podcast. This is story light and a story heavy. So
I think to make the story like universe work, we would have to be like weed, like pot smokers, and just like sit around. You know what I mean? Like that's the next level.
oh,
Like,
Joe
or
Rogan.
maybe we should do like the mushroom. Yeah, right. Like we should do the mushroom thing. If we did the mushroom thing, we could totally do the story universe podcast.
I would even pay a lot of money to see us on mushrooms.
I would too. Wouldn't that be hilarious?
Some of our conversations already get out there, but they're still kind of grounded because we always kind of come back to reality. But phew,
Yeah.
reality might go out of the window on
Yeah.
things like that.
Sometimes you gotta like snap back to reality.
Oh, there goes that gravity.
There was gravity. Oh,
Oh,
oh, oh. Well, I do believe, my
we
boy
could-
Al, that this is a fantastic place to end this podcast
yeah,
before
yeah,
we go off the
shouldn't go
rails any
any-
further.
absolutely.
So, and we're coming up on an hour. So, anyway,
Oh,
it's good
that's fun.
timing. So,
Yep, it's
yeah.
been fun. Thank you, Steve.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Like, share, rate, subscribe, tell your friends, hide your kids, hide your wife, all those things. We'll see you next time.
See ya.